believes that there's something sinister about
And here's the big
genetic
question for
modification.
you and me.
How we really
Is
feel
this
about
stuff
genetic
safe
engineering
to
here at
eat?
SciShow.
There's so much fake news out there
Why do we
about
need
GMOs.
I am Logan Rowe.
My name is Casey Mapano.
I'm Kiki Zeppos.
We are the opposition to prove the many fallacies and cons given by the pro-GMO side due to the reasons of ecological impact, ethical and moral standpoint, political gain, and cultural impacts.
In the video here, taken by the GMA, which is the main news source of the Philippines, you can see hundreds of Filipino men and women tearing down fences and swarming and stomping rice fields. Both groups are from the anti-GMO groups KMB and Sikwal GMO in the Bicol region of the Philippines. The rice field did grow the experimental golden rice that, if eaten, would convert to vitamin A. The golden rice was grown here in order to cure the vitamin A deficiency in the Philippines. But if the main cause of growth of golden rice intends to be good, then why are dozens of activists stomping on them? Well, according to an activist, Ingo Porticus, states, "I am outraged that the rice was just taken weeks away from being harvested. Important data were to be collected from that field, and this can set us back months." As of 2019, according to the Agricultural Department of the Philippines, they have spent multi-million dollars on the growth and testing of GM crops to solve the vitamin A deficiency. According to the IRR, $100 million was already spent in this development, while the Bill of Melinda Gates Foundation gave an additional $10.3 million grant to fund further development and commercialization of the golden rice in order to solve the vitamin A deficiency, serves the biotech industry in its effort to win their approval for GM crops. According to Washington University anthropologist Glenn Stone, explains that the golden rice was a promising idea backed by its good intentions. In contrast to the anti-GMO activists, I argued that I deserved a chance to succeed. But if I were actually interested in the welfare of the poor children, instead of just fighting over GMOs, then we'd have to make an unbiased assessment of possible solutions. The simple fact is that after 24 years of researching and breeding, golden rice is still years away from being ready for its release. And even if genetic modification succeeds in creating a strain of rice productive enough for poor farmers to grow successfully, it's still unclear on how much the rice would impact the children's health. As Stone points out, it's still unknown if the beta-carotene in the golden rice can be converted to vitamin A in the bodies of badly unnourished children. There also has been little research to show how well the beta-carotene in golden rice will hold up and be stored for long periods of time between harvest seasons, or even when cooked using traditional methods common to remote rural locations. In other words, if golden rice is alone, it's expected to not solve all of the Philippines, only in the Philippines world hunger, but other countries such as India, Pakistan, Sudan, and other areas of the world. Are GM crops really solving their intended goal? And if the GM crops are barely getting approved and being commercially used in the Philippines in 10 years, if the golden rice and other GM crops were to expand into these other countries, it would still have to go through the same things that the Philippines were going through, and a negative impact to the country and the people.
Giants is that Spain is by far and away the EU's biggest grower of GM or genetically modified crops, whereas zero is grown in French soil.
Hundreds of countries that have banned the growth and consumption of GM crops and food, such as France, Germany, Denmark, Greece, and Italy. These countries have a strict ban on GM crops and food, while the US allows GM crops and food to be grown and consumed. So how does the ban of GM crops affect these countries, these European countries, compared to the United States? Well, according to the New York Times, an article written by Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of the Scottish National Party, states that instead the priority was to protect the green image of countries' produce. And to add on, according to the USDA's article on the United States and European consumption comparison, states that a quantity of bread and cereal costs $100 in the United States, but that would only cost $85 in Portugal and only $40 in the Czech Republic. To add on, a quantity of meat only costing $100 in the United States will cost $73 in Hungary or Poland. And half of Europe bans GM crops, according to the Washington Post. So not only does Europe have a greater share of wealth when it comes to high quality foods, but since most people in Europe is against GM foods and the US is still on the debate if GMO crops should be accepted or not, and that Europe has totally banned it, then GM crops have a in Europe to be relatively higher than the US in the food industry in terms of pricing and quality. So they not only are foods that are non-GMO relatively cheaper than in the US, but in terms of the food industry, they're relatively higher in household expenditure, which is key in a capitalist society.
A news article by Newman C. on October 19, 2018, shows the largest ever study which reveals the environmental impact of genetically modified crops. In other words, genetically modifying plants that contain an herbicide. Studies show that an increased use of chemicals as weeds are adapting to become immune to OSME herbicides. This is similar to the Monsanto controversy. Monsanto, a multinational food and seed corporation, was sued for over $2.2 billion to a small family farmer at the Pylons. Why? Because GMO seeds were sold by Monsanto were poisoned with the glyphosate, or best known as insect killer, Roundup. In other words, crops and seeds were sprayed with toxic chemicals known to kill bugs. This caused farmers and consumers to be diagnosed with a type of neurological cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. According to the Washington Post, it states that the overuse of pesticides, such as the one Monsanto markets within its GM crops, has contributed to the environmental damage and herbicide resistance. Not only do weeds and pesticides become immune to the pesticides and herbicides, but in this case of Monsanto, consumers to be diagnosed with lymphoma. The real problem of GMO crops is not why people do not want to consume them, but rather the ecological impact of GM crops around the world. According to the NEP.edu, agriculture has historically converted biologically diverse natural grasslands, wetlands, and native forests into a less diverse agro-ecosystem to produce food and fiber. It is because the GM crops being planted and renewed ecosystems are impacting the environment negatively rather than its own goal.
Golden rice seems like a realistic solution for everyone, and we agree. As an opposition, the GM crops such as the golden rice pose as a silver bullet solution to end the world's hunger crisis. But the opposition says that the project is deeply flawed. For starters, Friends of the Earth, MASIPAG, agree that merely planting golden rice will not solve the world's hunger crisis. They point out that there are multiple resources for malnutrition planned and currently in place that are cheaper and do not require GMOs, and that should make golden rice unnecessary. For example, the UNICEF employs a vitamin A supplementation program that improves a child's survival rate by 12 to 24% with the price of only a few cents. In addition, golden rice may specifically target deficiency of vitamin A, but it could not address the countless additional social, economic, and cultural facts that contribute to the vitamin A deficiencies. Friends of Earth stated that the golden rice produces too little beta-carotene and eradicate the world's hunger crisis, solely 1.6 micrograms per gram of rice and 10% of the daily requirement of vitamin A. The amount of golden rice needed for sufficient vitamin A intake would be great in comparison to the rice available in developing countries. Finally, there are social and cultural roadblocks. There are eating stable portions from governments and preferences developedly rooted in long-standing tradition. The yellow color of the rice may not be accepted in different countries because of the social and cultural history. Resistance to the GM crops would exist worldwide.
Although it is believed by the pro-GM crop side that the GM crops are engineered to be resistant to insects, there's also the reduction of pesticides which results in cheaper GM crops to harvest. Although, despite the fact that there's a decrease in pesticide and herbicide use, continued growth in the herbicide use poses a significant problem as large doses of chemicals can harm biodiversity and increase water and air pollution. On January 24, 2000, Greenpeace, an anti-GMO campaign, sued the EPA to ban Bt crops. According to an article, Greenpeace wins the first round in EPA lawsuit to ban Bt crops, said by the IATP states. Scientists warn that corn genetically engineered with a Bt pesticide in each of its cells could lead to insect resistances within 3 to 4 years, thereby wiping out the effectiveness of Bt for organic farmers. By aiding this process, the EPA may force the use of more and newer pesticides in the near future. Studies show the pollen from Bt corn to be toxic to the monarch and other butterfly larvae. If the GM crop, such as the Bt crop alone, continues to ecologically impact our environment, then species such as the declining population of monarch butterflies will go extinct, and chain effects of other species will also decrease, such as birds, small animals, and other insects. In all, despite the fact that there is a decrease in pesticide and herbicide use, continued growth in the herbicide use poses a significant environmental problem, as large doses of chemicals can harm biodiversity and increase water and air pollution.
It is believed that the GM crops have many positive moral and ethical standpoints. We as the opposition disagree. According to the Moral Dilemma of Genetically Modified Food by Fordham University states, although I don't think that it is ethically right to manipulate plants and animals by injecting foreign genes into them, I would be more inclined to agree with Fedorov on the potential benefits GMOs would have to present and future generations. If there is more independent research on the effects of GMOs, companies that produce GMO products pay researchers to perform tests on GMOs in order to get the outcomes that are in favor of GMOs. Also, when independent research is done, GMO companies have the history of paying off researchers to suppress the research findings that go against the benefits of GMOs. I think independent research is important and non-biased. If it was done correctly, I think it would be useful to allow consumers and myself the actual benefits and negatives of GMOs. This would allow consumers to make an educated judgment about GMOs instead of worrying about the unknown effects of GMOs. In other words, the ethical issue of GMOs is injecting foreign genes into plants and then eating them. Is it wrong to do this? Yes, the ethical issue of this is immoral to tamper and genetically change plants and animals to their benefit.